Okay, in step one was the most important, and that's selecting the right article. Now, as part of that, you should have filled out your internal assessment planning sheet, which identifies what the article's about, what the key terms are you're going to use. So, for example, negative externalities, demerit goods, and so on. You've also identified one or two diagrams that you're going to use in your commentary, and this should help when we're talking about structuring your IA, as you've got essentially the main things that you need to talk about already identified. Okay, so key things to remember. Avoid writing things that will not get you any marks. So this is where you need to have a look at the rubric, be fully aware of what the rubric says. For example, just mention, talk about the article itself. This isn't your extended essay where you have to have a look at 6 or 7 other sources or even more. You're looking at the article and using your knowledge to explain what the article is talking about from an economic point of view. So avoid using quotes and long introductions, as you're not going to get lots of marks for this, or any in fact. You're not going to stick to one section of the course. So if you're talking about microeconomics and market failure, stick to that. Do not go into macroeconomics and talk about how it's going to impact the whole of the economy because of one market not performing, because you've only got 750 words and this is not a lot. Less is often more, so focus on one or two diagrams and explain these in great detail as opposed to including 3 or 4 and only explaining them briefly. And focus on evaluating one solution. So it's no good evaluating 3 or 4 solutions, just pick one solution. And as I'll mention later again, if the article mentions more than one solution, just highlight in the article which one you're going to evaluate. Okay, step 1. So already mentioned, no lengthy introductions. You do not need to define everything. You only need to use words appropriately. This will show that you know what they mean. So for example, you don't need to go, market failure is da 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 da. Okay, you just need to use the words appropriately. However, I would still define the keywords, but only after you've used them. So for example, this article talks about market failure and then describe market failure is. Always use economic terms throughout your entire internal assessment. So don't use generic terms that we use every day. Use the economic term. So an example for step 1. So as you can see here, this article talks about how the Chinese government is choosing to intervene in the tobacco market to correct market failure, and in particular the negative externalities cigarettes produce by banning the advertising of them. So just literally a sentence or maybe 2 sentences introducing what the article is about and highlighting the key terms you're going to use. And then the second paragraph defining what those key terms are in relation to your article, so you're getting application marks. So I'll just leave that on the screen for a second. You can pause this and read through it yourself, but I'm not going to read through it. You can read through it yourselves. Okay, step 2. Draw and label diagrams. So you should have identified these in your internal assessment planning anyway. So now you need to draw the diagrams. Remember, when you're drawing the diagrams, you need to use a title and use an appropriate title. Don't use a generic title. So if it's talking about the market for apples in Singapore, put the market for apples in Singapore. So it's precise. Label all your lines, so your axes. Mark your intersections with letters, as I'll show you in a second. Shade in any things that you're going to want to explain in more detail. And if the articles mention exact prices, so the price has gone up from £3 a packet of cigarettes to £3.50 because of tax, put those precise prices on your diagram. And also for quantities, okay, if the quantity of cigarettes have reduced from 60 million packets a year to 40 million packets a year, pop those figures on your diagram. Okay, so for example, this diagram is a really good one about negative x analyses, but it's only okay. We want to go from okay to excellent. So we need to put a title, and I've put an example of a title we might use there. So negative x analyses of consumption of cigarettes in China. Also here we've put price of cigarettes, we've got dollars. You might have euros or you might have pounds. However, this is talking about China. Okay, so we will put Chinese yen, okay, and put the appropriate symbol in there instead, so it's appropriate to the article. Likewise here, we've got a shaded area, but we may label those intersections, as we said on the other slide, A, B, C. So this allows us to easily describe the shaded diagram. This shaded triangle ABC shows the welfare loss. Okay. Also, like I've said, the prices and the quantities might be mentioned in the article, so put those down if they are. Okay, so that's step 2. Now we've drawn the diagrams, we need to make sure that we've explained them correctly. So step 3 is fully explaining your diagrams. So explain things step by step. So like we've explained in class, don't go right from one side of the river to the next. Explain things from step by step. So don't say A will lead to Z. Okay, A will lead to B, which will lead to C, which will lead to D, which will lead to the end result. So presume the reader knows nothing. So don't say, well, the examiner will know what I mean. Okay, you have to presume the examiner is potentially new to economics. So please explain things step by step. So this is seen in the example here. So you might think this is a good example, okay, but that's not going to get you full marks in terms of explanation and analysis of or the in fact the diagrams itself. You need to be able to explain the diagrams fully. So the second part here is a better explanation. So again, if you've noticed, it refers to the diagram S1 to S2 and PE and P1, and it explains why this is the case and doesn't just presume the examiner knows why this is the case. So pause and have a read through this yourself and see the difference between the first explanation and the second explanation. This is really important to do it step by step. Okay, step 4, you need to develop your explanation. So you've already started your analysis by fully explaining the diagram, but now you need to go deeper. This might involve explaining how the theory you explained does not quite seem to be what it is, happening due to external factors. Okay, so in other words, ceteris paribus not being the case. So we would have expected, the theory says that this is going to happen, but actually the article says that this is happening. The reason for this might be A, B, or C. Remember, you are not evaluating at this stage. You are just explaining fully the theory and how the theory relates to the case. So this is just double checking that you've done sufficient analysis, okay, and you've expanded on just explaining the theory and the diagram. Okay, then finally, you need to, step 5, evaluate the solution. So every article is about a problem. So whether it's there's been a drought, so apples are too expensive, or in the article we looked at in the last video, cigarettes are causing health problems. This is a problem, okay? So we want to have a solution to the problem. Just describe one of the solutions. So as I already said a few minutes ago, sometimes articles may mention a number of solutions. Just pick one. So highlight this in your article to show the examiner which one you're focusing on. Because you've only got 750 words and this will soon pass. So for example, apples too expensive after drought. The solution might be a price control. In the cigarette case in China, they've banned advertising of cigarettes, so you need to assess that solution. You could potentially mention some other solutions that you would consider having being better and explaining why they might be better, but you need to evaluate the solution. If the article doesn't include a solution, it just identifies a problem, you need to suggest a solution, but pick one that you think is likely to work, so ones that we talked about throughout the course. You need to remember to use CLASP, which we've talked about in class, or WeSteps, to get all your evaluation marks. So just choose 3 of these. So for example, this could include short-term or long-term. This could include stakeholders. This could include assumptions. So assumptions that are made that in reality aren't going to be real. So for example, this would be good if we could assume everything stays the same, so ceteris paribus, but in reality it doesn't. Therefore, I don't think this solution is going to be appropriate because there's other factors that are taking place, such as. And again, just do a web search for these things, CLASP and WeSteps. Finally, highlight the assumption made by the theory. So again, coming back, that includes the assumptions there in CLASP. Okay, so please review that these two approaches to evaluation are really good to make sure that you're doing that, but do at least 3. And I would also always recommend you looking at stakeholders, looking at assumptions, okay, like we've said here, and then choosing 1 or potentially 2 others. So short-term and long-term are always good ones, and so on. Okay, right, so that brings us to the end of structuring your IA. This should be fairly straightforward. Have a look at the examples that I've put on Schoolology, and to look at how they've structured it. And remember, you've only got 750 words, so be brief.